Have you ever been invited to a wedding, just to babysit? I'm Iris Mathers, and one summer morning, I folded a towel, packed my bag, and thought I was just heading to help my sister on her big day. But by the end of that weekend, I would give away her wedding venue to strangers. Not out of spite. Out of something far deeper. And long overdue. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. That Wednesday wasn't beautiful, but it wasn't ugly either. I remember it because I was folding the last hand towel into my suitcase, the one with the small tear in the corner that I hadn't had the heart to throw away. It was the same one I always brought to family events, like it somehow helped me hold things together, both practically and emotionally. I was heading to Willow Glen Estate for my sister's wedding. That place had been booked months in advance, and although Celine did all the planning, the confirmation email had come to me. At the time, I told myself it was a simple mistake. Just a glitch in the form, maybe I was listed as a secondary contact or something. But my name was the only one on the contract. I saw it, and I ignored it. That's what I did back then. I ignored a lot of things. I zipped up the suitcase and took a long look around my living room. Everything was still, like it always was. No pets, no kids. Just the ticking of that old wall clock I never reset after daylight savings. I locked the door and got in the car, telling myself it would be fine. I'd help Celine out, watch the kids, make sure the dessert table didn't collapse. Nothing I hadn't done before. Somewhere along Route 2, I stopped for gas at a small station just outside Montpelier. I grabbed a coffee, burnt, too hot, just how I somehow liked it, and sat on the bench outside to stretch my legs. My phone buzzed. Facebook notification. I shouldn't have opened it. It was a post from Celine, so grateful for everyone pitching in to make our special day perfect. Couldn't do it without this amazing family. Each of you has a role. Special thanks to Iris, as always, for being the best babysitter a bride could ask for. My fingers curled a little around the phone. Babysitter. Like that was my role in the family, like I had a title, and that was it. I stared at the screen for a long time. My coffee got cold in my hands. And still, I thought, she's just busy. Weddings are stressful. She probably didn't mean it like that. That's another thing I used to do. Make excuses for people who never asked me to, but always expected it. There was a small cafe next to the gas station. Nothing fancy. Vinyl booths, a chalkboard menu with today's soup scrawled in uneven letters. I stepped inside mostly for warmth. The woman behind the counter was young, probably late 20s. Short black bob, silver nose ring, soft New England accent. She smiled as I came up. What can I get for you? I hesitated, then chuckled. Something sweet, I guess. It's wedding week. Her eyes lit up. Yours? I laughed harder than I should have. God, no. My sister's. I'm just going to help out. Keep an eye on the kids. Make sure no one puts a match near the floral arrangements. She rang up a slice of lemon cake. You sound like the MVP. I shrugged, paid, and sat by the window. A few minutes later, she brought over the cake with a napkin tucked underneath the plate. You're helping your daughter on her big day. That's beautiful. I paused. She's my sister. The girl blinked. Oh. I just assumed. She trailed off, and I gave her a smile to let her off the hook. But inside, that sentence settled hard. People never saw me as the center of anything. Not the mother, not the bride, not the one with stories told about them. Just the helper. The one who showed up early and stayed late and did the jobs no one wanted. I left a tip and walked back to my car. The rain had started, Just a mist, not enough to make you run, but enough to make you pull your jacket tighter. I remember looking at my reflection in the window before getting in. My hair looked tired. My eyes looked like they didn't want to argue. I told myself, like I always did, that I just needed to get through the weekend. Be pleasant. Be helpful. Be small. I didn't know it yet, but this time was different. Something in me had already started shifting. Maybe it was the name on the contract. Maybe it was the Facebook post. Maybe it was that girl, thinking I must be somebody's mother, not just somebody's backup. But something had cracked, quietly. I turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of the parking lot, and whispered to no one in particular, just a few days. Then back to normal. I was wrong. Very wrong. I arrived earlier than I thought I would. The drive was quiet, mostly empty back roads and fields that were neither green nor gold, just somewhere in between, like they hadn't decided what season they wanted to be in. When I pulled into Willow Glen, there were only 2 other cars in the gravel lot. The main building sat tucked behind rows of pine and birch trees, its white porch peeling just slightly, the kind of place that looked elegant in a brochure but tired up close. The key to my room was taped to the check-in window with my name in blocky handwriting, Iris M. Cottage 4. I carried my bag across the path and unlocked the door to a small, wood-paneled cabin that smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and mildew. It had a twin bed, a desk, a bathroom with a shower curtain that didn't quite reach the floor. I hadn't been there more than 5 minutes when I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Celine standing there, hair perfectly pinned, sunglasses still on, holding a clipboard like she was inspecting a rental property. "Hope you brought the extra pillows," she said, not hello, not thanks for coming, just that. The twins get cranky without their nap gear, and the rental place said they didn't have any left. I opened my mouth, closed it, then nodded. "They're in the trunk. I'll grab them later." She glanced past me into the room, nodded once, and turned on her heel. "Dinner's at 6. Keep the kids out of the main hall till after the rehearsal walkthrough, please." I watched her walk away, the clicking of her heels sharp against the gravel. No hug. No how are you. Not even a thanks for making the trip. That night, I sat on the edge of the narrow bed with my overnight bag open in front of me. I had packed 3 outfits, none of which were what you'd call wedding attire. Just a navy cardigan, slacks, and a blouse I'd worn to church the previous month. I realized, sitting there, that I didn't own a single dress meant for celebration. Not really. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email, intending to check the dinner schedule Celine had sent. Instead, I saw something else, an older message from 3 months ago with the subject line, "Confirmation, Willow Glen booking." It was addressed to me. From the venue itself. I clicked on it again, just to make sure. The attached PDF had my name at the top, the reservation under Iris Mathers, event holder. There was no mention of Celine anywhere in the paperwork. I frowned. I remembered now, vaguely, that she'd called back then, asking if I could handle the logistics because I still had access to our mother's old nonprofit account. She said it was just for the initial booking, so she wouldn't have to deal with the paperwork. Said it would help with the tax benefit, since I was technically listed as the legacy contact for Alara House. I hadn't questioned it. I rarely questioned Celine. Before I could think too hard about it, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tara. "Still in Vermont? Just saw someone post pics from Willow Glen. You staying there? If yes, coffee tomorrow? I've got something wild to share. I think you'll find it interesting." I hadn't seen Tara in nearly a year, not since she moved south for a new job at another nonprofit. She was the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, checked in on rainy days, and brought you a sandwich when she thought you might have skipped lunch. She wasn't flashy, but she was kind in a way that felt rare. Real. I typed back quickly, I'm here. Coffee sounds good. Tell me where. The reply came almost instantly, June's Diner, 9 a.m. I set my phone down on the side table, staring at the ceiling. The silence in the cabin pressed in on me, soft but heavy. Outside, the breeze rustled through the trees like someone trying not to speak too loudly. I couldn't stop thinking about that contract. Technically, legally, the venue was mine. My name. My signature. My responsibility. Celine had said she just needed a shortcut, a name to put on the booking. I had told myself it was no big deal. But now, sitting there alone with the proof in my inbox, I wasn't so sure. I looked back into my suitcase and ran my fingers over the folded edge of the cardigan, suddenly wondering if I had packed the right things, if I had brought the right version of myself to this weekend. I had always been the helper. The one who filled the gaps, who carried nap pillows and handled receipts and stood behind the camera instead of in front of it. But something about that email made me feel like I'd stepped over a line I didn't even know was there. And maybe it was time to ask what would happen if I didn't step back. The rehearsal dinner wasn't much of a dinner, more like boxed salads and lukewarm pasta trays set up in the lodge's side hall. The table centerpieces were still half done, napkins hadn't been folded yet, and everyone looked slightly sunburned or over-caffeinated. Celine, naturally, floated in like everything was under control, even though it clearly wasn't. She clinked her glass, tapped her spoon to her clipboard, and said, "Okay, let's go over everyone's duties for tomorrow." There was something about the way she said duties that made it sound like we were all her unpaid staff, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely wrong. "Travis," she said, nodding to her ex-husband turned event DJ, "you're still on soundcheck and playlist, right?" He gave her a lazy thumbs up from the corner of the room where he was tinkering with some tangled cables. "Cynthia and Maureen, you've got the tables and gift station. Keep everything symmetrical, and please make sure the lanterns match." The two older sisters nodded dutifully. They always had the front-facing tasks, the parts guests actually noticed. Then her eyes found me. "And Iris, just keep an eye on the kids, yeah? Don't let them near the dessert trays or the fountain. You know how they get." I smiled, like always. Just the little tilt of lips, not too big, not too small. I didn't say anything. I never did, really. But that didn't mean it didn't land hard. Nobody blinked. Nobody looked uncomfortable. They were used to this version of me, the default helper, the built-in support system, the person who always said yes. Later that evening, I stood near the fireplace in the lounge while one of Celine's grandkids tugged at my cardigan. He couldn't have been more than 5. His hands were sticky from the melting cupcake he'd stolen from the back table. He looked up at me and asked, "Are you the maid?" I blinked. "What?" "My mom said you're the helper lady. Like the maid. You do the kid stuff." Before I could answer, Celine walked by, overhearing, and actually chuckled. "Kids say the darndest things, huh," she said, patting him on the head before walking off. I just stood there. Not angry. Not hurt. Not yet. Mostly hollow. That night, I went back to my little cabin and sat on the bed with the lights off. I picked up my phone and hovered over Tara's name. My thumb tapped her contact, but I didn't hit call. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the text field, thinking of writing something, anything. I typed, then deleted, "You ever feel like you disappeared in your own life?" Then I tried again, "Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. Pray for me?" Deleted that too. I finally just set the phone down. Stared at the ceiling, same way I used to do when I was 15, listening to my sisters fight while I pretended not to exist. Some people think keeping quiet makes you the strong one. That absorbing the tension without snapping makes you noble. But there's a cost. And I'd been paying it for years, little by little, in smiles that didn't belong to me and roles I never auditioned for. Still, I told myself what I always did, just a couple more days. Don't stir the pot. Don't make things harder than they need to be. She's the bride. Let her have her moment. I lay down fully clothed, not even bothering to change. It was too much work, and I was too tired. But not the kind of tired a nap fixes. It was deeper than that, bone tired. Soul tired. I closed my eyes and whispered to the dark, "It's fine. I've done this before. Just get through it." But even as I said it, something inside me shifted, like a loose nail in an old step, small, maybe, but the kind of thing you trip over when you least expect. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. That I'd planned to stand up for myself. But the truth is, I was still hoping I could smile my way through one more weekend. I didn't know yet that this time, smiling wasn't going to be enough. The next morning, I met Tara at a diner called June's, the kind of place where the booths were a little too tight and the coffee refills kept coming whether you wanted them or not. It smelled like syrup and old linoleum, familiar, unpretentious, real. She was already there when I walked in, waving me over with a look that said, "This isn't just a social catch-up." I slid into the booth across from her, and she pushed a manila folder toward me without saying a word. I looked at it, then at her. "What's this?" "Go ahead," she said, sipping her coffee. "Take a look." Inside were printouts, emails, mostly. A few screenshots of web forms. Reservation logs. My name showed up again and again, Iris Mathers. Event holder. Primary contact. Responsible party. I frowned. Yeah, I already saw this. I mean, I got the confirmation months ago, but Celine said. Tara held up a hand. "I'm not done." She pulled out a second stack of papers. These were different, messages between someone named Louisa and the Willow Glen booking office. Formal, polite, but unmistakably tense. The last one read, "Due to the venue's policies, we are unable to accommodate your event at this time." I looked up. "Louisa? Jade's fiancé," she said. "They've been trying to book Willow Glen for months. Got denied twice. The place gave them some vague line about scheduling conflicts, but," she raised an eyebrow. "2 women? Small-town Vermont? You do the math." I felt something shift in my stomach. "I saw Jade yesterday," I said, more to myself than to her. "She served me coffee at that pit stop diner." Tara leaned in, her voice quiet but pointed. "You're the one on the paperwork, Iris. That means you have the power here. Not Celine." I sat back, heart doing a weird fluttering thing that I didn't quite understand. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time you asked yourself who deserves that space more. And maybe it's time you stop signing off on Celine's choices with your silence." I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the window beside us, where a bird was pecking at a crack in the sidewalk. I thought of the contract. My name. My initials. The fact that I'd never been offered a real seat at the table, just handed plates and told where to stand. Then I thought about Jade. And Louisa. 2 women trying to celebrate love and being told, subtly but firmly, that their kind of love didn't fit into the picture. "I don't even know them," I whispered. Tara reached across the table and touched my hand. "You don't need to." Back at the cottage that night, I couldn't sit still. I paced, reheated the same cup of tea 3 times, then dumped it out. I checked my phone, no messages from Celine. Nothing unusual. Then, right around 9 o'clock, there was a knock. She stood in the doorway with a dress bag slung over her arm, her mouth pulled into that tight little smile she used when she wanted something to seem like a favor, not an order. "I figured you wouldn't bring anything fancy," she said, walking in without waiting to be invited. This one's simple, nothing flashy. I had it taken in a little. She unzipped the garment bag. The dress was pale gray, shapeless, the kind of thing you wear to blend in, not stand out. Just don't wear those chunky shoes of yours, she added. And keep the makeup natural, okay? It's not that kind of role. I looked at her, really looked this time. What role is that? She blinked. You know. Support. Like always. My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. So I shouldn't look like I belong in any photos. She laughed, but there was a pinch of confusion in her face now. Oh, Iris. Don't make this about that. But maybe it was about that. Maybe it always had been. I folded the dress back into the bag and handed it to her. I'll figure something out. As she turned to go, she said over her shoulder, thanks again, by the way. You're always the one we can count on. I closed the door behind her and locked it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, the email from the venue open on my phone again. My name, bold at the top. Just mine. I could still hear Tara's voice in my head. Let me ask you something, why aren't you angry? And I didn't have an answer. Not then. But I could feel it rising, slow, steady, long overdue. I sat alone in that little cabin while the rehearsal music floated through the window screens like someone humming a tune they barely remembered. The sound system kept hiccuping, bursts of static, half-cut verses, someone muttering into the mic. It was sloppy, distracted. But somehow, that made it feel more honest than anything else that weekend. The lights were off. I'd pulled the shades halfway down, left just the desk lamp on, the kind with the fake brass neck and chipped base. It threw a soft circle of light on the naughty wood paneling, the kind of glow that made everything look like it belonged to an old photo album. In my lap was a picture I always kept in my wallet, folded once down the middle, me and Mom under the maple tree in her yard, from a Sunday when nothing happened and everything felt right. She had that calm look on her face, like she saw something in me no one else did. Not because I was doing anything impressive, just because I was there. That was enough for her. With Celine, it was never quite enough. I could hear her voice even in the silence, echoes of all the years we'd rehearsed our parts like a script. You're the only one who doesn't make things harder, Iris. That's why I count on you. At the time, I wore that sentence like a badge. Like I was the chosen one for not rocking the boat. But sitting there now, it felt less like praise and more like a chain, the kind that doesn't chafe until one day, you move differently, and it snaps tight. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. Tara. Jade and Louisa just lost the last venue they had on hold. If you want to do something, I'll help. But it has to come from you. I didn't answer right away. I didn't even blink. I let the message sit there like a small fire in a room full of dry paper. The truth was, I could have ignored it. I could have told myself it wasn't my business. I barely knew Jade. And Louisa? I hadn't even seen her face. But I did know something. I knew what it felt like to be quietly pushed out of moments that should have belonged to you. To be treated like a footnote in your own story. To be necessary, but never central. I stood and crossed to the desk, opened my laptop. I found the contract with the ease of muscle memory. It was saved next to grocery lists, donation receipts, and a folder labeled house stuff that hadn't been opened since Mom passed. The file opened. There it was. Line after line of boilerplate text until one line stopped me cold. Event holder, Iris Mathers. No backup contact. No co-planner. Just me. I hit print. The travel-sized printer I'd packed out of habit sputtered awake, slowly pushing out each page. I watched it work like someone watching a pot boil, not out of curiosity, but because if I looked away, I might change my mind. When the final page came out, I didn't move for a long while. Just sat there, the pages resting on my lap like they had weight beyond their paper stock. Maybe they did. I ran my thumb along the bottom margin, where my signature sat quiet and sharp. And I felt something crack. Not a shattering. No dramatics. Just a clean break. Like ice splitting down the center of a frozen lake, not dangerous yet, but irreversible. Because it wasn't just about this wedding. It was about every year I'd sat in the back row so someone else could shine without interruption. Every meal I cooked while others took credit for a family effort. Every time someone called me strong when what they really meant was compliant. I remembered moments I thought I'd forgotten, Celine deciding I'd skip college to care for Mom just for a year. Maureen saying I had the most forgiving spirit, when what I had was no practice saying no. My brother telling me once that I was born to keep the peace. Born for it. As if being accommodating was a destiny. The printer beeped once, out of paper. Fitting. I didn't refill it. I didn't need to. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes. The pre-wedding dinner was held in the main hall at Willow Glen, just before sunset. The light poured in through the tall windows in long amber stripes, bouncing off the glassware like it was all part of some carefully staged movie scene. But if it was a movie, I knew exactly what my role had been cast as. Background. There were name cards at every table. Mine read simply, Iris, kids' table assistant. Not even aunt. Not even guest. Just a title that barely disguised a task. I watched everyone clink glasses and laugh too loud at things that weren't funny. My sisters wore soft pastels, pearls at their throats. Celine looked regal in cream chiffon, basking in the glow of being the center of everything. People were taking photos, making toasts, raising glasses high like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong between any of us. I kept my napkin in my lap, fingers twisting it, trying to decide if I should just sit there and let it all slide by again. But something in me had snapped earlier that day, and once a thread is pulled far enough, the whole seam eventually gives way. I stood. Nobody noticed at first. The room was too loud. But when I moved toward the front and gently tapped the mic with the back of my hand, the feedback hush broke the crowd into curiosity. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I didn't even know if I'd speak until my fingers brushed the edge of the microphone. But once I began, I didn't stop. I used to think staying quiet was the best way to keep the peace, I said, my voice steady, not loud. That if I kept doing the small things no one wanted to do, maybe that would be enough to earn a place at the table. Now the room was truly still. I've played that part for a long time. Smiled on cue. Said thank you and handed instructions instead of invitations. Told myself it was love, just wrapped in expectation. Celine was staring at me. Mouth tight, eyes narrowed, like she couldn't decide whether to stop me or wait it out. But I'm not going to play that role anymore, I said. I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending that support means silence. I stepped away from the mic. Not dramatically, not for applause. There wasn't any, anyway. Celine caught up with me halfway across the room, gripping my elbow and steering me out the back doors with a force I hadn't felt from her since we were teenagers arguing in Mom's kitchen. What the hell are you doing? She hissed, her voice sharp but low. You're ruining this. This is my wedding, Iris. I looked at her, really looked. At the polished exterior, the desperation to control every angle. I wasn't seeing a villain, I was seeing a woman so used to managing chaos, she couldn't tell the difference between love and control anymore. I didn't mention you by name, I said softly. You didn't have to. She threw her hands up. I've carried this family on my back. I've organized every holiday, handled every mess, planned this whole damn thing, and all I asked was for you to help with the kids. Just that. And you never asked who I was beyond that, I said. You didn't want a sister. You wanted staff. Her face twisted, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. "I've done everything for this family," she said again, but it sounded weaker this time. I nodded. "Maybe. But you never asked what it cost the rest of us." I walked back toward my cabin as the music picked back up. Laughter returned inside like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just cracked something wide open. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and composed a brief email. "Dear Willow Glen Management. This is to confirm that I, Iris Mathers, as the sole listed event holder for June 10th, hereby relinquish all use of the property for said date in favor of Jade Sawyer and Louisa Bennett. All fees previously paid remain valid, and full transfer of access is authorized. No drama. No threats. Just a clean decision." I hit send and sat back, exhaling like I'd been holding my breath for years. The morning of the wedding, the sun came out in full. No clouds. No wind. Just that kind of golden, steady warmth that makes trees seem taller and the sky stretch wider. It was the kind of weather brides dream about. The kind that makes photographers work fast and guests linger outside for photos long after the ceremony ends. But that morning, it wasn't Celine standing at the altar under the arbor wrapped in eucalyptus. It was Jade. I wasn't there to see it in person, of course. I'd made sure of that. But later, Tara told me how it all went down. She said Jade wore a dark emerald suit, and Louisa cried so hard during her vows she could barely get the words out. Most of the chairs were filled with friends, co-workers, neighbors, people who had watched them build something honest together. The kind of people who showed up not out of obligation but out of love. Meanwhile, at 10:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with Celine's name. Then again. And again. A series of missed calls, then texts. "What the hell is going on, Iris? Tell me this isn't real. Where are you? You have 5 minutes to explain." None of them were answered. Not that day. Not for a long time. She must have shown up at Willow Glen in full makeup, probably holding her bouquet just right, ready to be adored. And instead, she saw white folding chairs filled with strangers, music she didn't recognize, and a couple whose names she hadn't even bothered to learn. I imagined the confusion on her face giving way to fury. The way she probably grabbed the first staff member she saw. The way her voice would have climbed octaves, trying to pull control back into her hands. But none of that reached me. I was 10 miles away, sitting on a slatted bench beneath a maple tree in Riverview Park. It was quiet, except for the sound of birds kicking up dust near the fountain. My book was open, though I wasn't really reading. It was just something to hold. Something to ground me. Tara's text came mid-morning. Jade cried. She didn't think strangers like you existed anymore. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I didn't believe her, but because something about the word strangers hit me in the chest. For so long, I'd been surrounded by people who claimed to know me. Sisters. Cousins. Family. But none of them had ever asked me what I wanted. What I felt. What I feared. Yet somehow, a young woman I'd met for less than 5 minutes now carried a piece of something I hadn't even known I had left to give. A kind of quiet defiance. A soft but firm no more. I didn't respond to Tara. Didn't need to. Some things don't require punctuation. Instead, I looked up from the bench and watched the sunlight flicker through the maple branches like little coins being tossed by the wind. And I smiled. Not the kind of smile you force at family dinners or pose within group photos. This was the kind that lives only in the corners of your mouth when no one's watching. The kind that feels earned. I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't rehearsing apologies in my head or wondering if I should have said things differently. I felt, still. Not triumphant. Not victorious. Just present. Whole. Enough. Let them talk. Let them decide what I was or wasn't. I knew what I was. I was the woman who finally stopped saying yes when she meant maybe. 1 week after the wedding, that wasn't, a postcard arrived in my mailbox. Not a phone call. Not a letter. Just a standard Vermont scenic card with a watercolor sketch of the state capitol and a single sentence on the back. Hope you're happy with your decision. Celine. No apology. No acknowledgement. No emotion, really. Just that flat tone Celine used when she wanted to sound gracious but couldn't quite swallow the bitterness underneath. I stood at my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long while, unsure what I was supposed to feel. Guilt? Relief? Victory? None of them came. Instead, there was a strange quiet inside me, like someone had finally turned off a noise I didn't know had been running in the background my whole life. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. A few days later, I heard through the grapevine, mostly via our cousin Patty, who had a talent for delivering news like it was no big deal, that Celine ended up hosting a scaled-down ceremony in a rented room at a steakhouse near the interstate. The flowers were plastic. The cake came late. Her dress was wrinkled from sitting too long in a garment bag that had traveled back and forth with no real destination. I didn't feel smug. Honestly, I just felt sad for her. Not because her day wasn't perfect, but because she'd spent her entire life arranging people like furniture and was stunned when someone finally refused to stay in the spot she picked. And then something unexpected started happening. A quiet wave of text messages and voicemails trickled in from the corners of the family tree. Not dramatic declarations. Just soft, human things. Aunt Diane left a message saying, "I always thought you were the only one with the guts to say it out loud." My cousin Lori sent me a text, "You did what I've been too scared to do for 20 years. Thank you." Even Maureen, the sister who'd always stayed neutral to keep the peace, sent a photo of her garden in bloom with a caption that read, "You were right to leave." I hadn't realized how many people were watching. Or how many of them had been carrying versions of the same silence I had. By early fall, I packed up my things and moved to a small town on the coast of Maine. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet rental house with a view of the docks and a yard that grew wild mint around the fence. I started teaching a weekly writing group at the local library, memoir, mostly, to women like me who had spent decades narrating their lives in the margins of everyone else's story. Some weeks we wrote about childhood. Other weeks we wrote letters we'd never send. One woman wrote about the smell of her mother's burned coffee and cried for 20 minutes straight. No one interrupted her. It wasn't therapy, but it was healing. It was space. And then, one Saturday, I got an envelope in the mail with handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photo of Jade and Louisa under that same arbor at Willow Glen, this time surrounded by friends, holding hands, grinning like they'd just pulled off something impossible. There was a note tucked behind it. "You gave us more than a venue. You gave us the feeling that we mattered. We'll never forget that. We're having a small celebration in October to mark our first year. We'd love for you to be there, this time as our guest of honor." When I arrived, they handed me a pale blue dress that actually fit. I didn't have to carry anyone else's shoes. I didn't refill water glasses. I didn't watch from behind a camera or clean up spilled juice or pass out napkins. I just stood there, holding a bouquet that wasn't mine but felt right in my hands. And for the first time, I wore something beautiful that wasn't meant to blend in. I danced once. Just once. It was enough. Looking back now, I think about that Wednesday when I folded a torn hand towel and thought I was just packing for another family favor. I had no idea that weekend would split my life into two parts, before I said no, and after I finally did. I used to believe that being chosen meant being useful. That if you weren't needed, you'd disappear. But that wasn't true. Turns out, the light doesn't avoid you. It's just been waiting for you to stop standing behind everyone else. I don't tell this story because I want pity or even praise. I share it because maybe you've been there too, in a quiet role you never auditioned for, just doing your part, hoping someone might notice. And if that's true, if any of this feels familiar, then I want you to know, it's not too late to rewrite the ending. You don't have to blow anything up or make some grand declaration. Sometimes, all it takes is one small choice, just big enough to remind yourself you still matter. So, what about you? Have you ever walked away from something that once defined you, just to finally feel like yourself again? If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll come back for the next one. I've got a few more tucked away in the corners of memory, stories that, like this one, took me a long time to understand, but are finally ready to be shared. Until then, take gentle care of yourself.